È possibile governare la complessità del nostro tempo? Cosa deve fare la PA per prendere decisioni più efficaci? Ne parliamo oggi con un ospite internazionale d'eccezione. Welcome everyone to FPA Road to Forum PA 2022. I'm super excited to be here with Professor Cass Sunstein, American legal scholar. He worked in the Obama administration for many years and has been also for many years professor at the prestigious Chicago Law School. Then he founded the Behavioral Economics and Public Policy program at the Harvard Law School. That's where he teaches today. He's also author of many books, many of them that resonate a lot with what we do here in FPA. A warm welcome to you, Professor.
Thank you. A great pleasure to be here.
So let's just start with the first question, and let's start with noise, one of your latest publication together with Daniel Kahneman and Oliver Sibony. Noise is a consideration over human judgment skills, and what emerges clearly from its reading is the extremely vulnerable nature of human ability to take decisions. Here at FPA we are interested in the intergovernmental side of all this, because if indeed the way or one of the ways to reduce noise is to be open to learn and listen carefully, then the key in policy making too is humility. Today, our ability to design and to evaluate what has been done, especially in the public sector, can be enhanced by data. Do you think that is this the new frontier to zero noise?
Okay, great, thank you. Let's define noise as variability in judgment. So if one person deciding whether someone gets a license says yes, and another person asked about the same applicant says no, we have noise, where whether someone gets a license depends on a lottery, which person ends up being the judge. All over government, in the criminal justice system, in benefit systems, in licenses and permits, in applications to schools often, there's a lot of noise, variability across people. There's also noise within people, meaning if you're in a good mood, you might say, yes, that person gets the license. If you're a little sad, maybe because your sports team lost over the weekend, you might think, no, that person doesn't get a license. And this kind of variability we observe in governments all over the world, and that's what we mean by noise. This kind of variability can produce terrible unfairness, where someone ends up being harmed or not helped just because of bad luck about the mood or the person who ends up making the decision. Or it might be that it causes very high costs within the system, because some people get things they shouldn't get, and other people don't get things they should get. There are lots of ways to reduce noise, and you refer to data and evidence. Those are really helpful. So if our decision about who gets a license depends on something like what's their background, what are their qualifications, what's their track record, then the fact that you draw one person rather than another to make the decision is less likely to be important. Guidelines are often a recipe for the reduction of noise as we understand it. If you're deciding whether a small infant born in Rome is sick, if you're just saying, do I think the kid is sick? That there's going to be noise. But if you use guidelines for assessing the health of an infant born in Rome, then their system is less likely to be noisy. Noise reduction is a great imperative for governments all over the world. The good news is that we know how to reduce noise.
So, thank you. Thank you. It's really interesting perspective about also our institutions. Moving on to the second question, as you are a very famous and expert of behavioral economics, Our time is the time of complexity and of cognitive shortcuts. No, in every sphere, from politics to communication, and we also experience it in science now during the pandemic. Yet, to overcome this complexity, we do not need to simplify the problems, to trivialize problems, because indeed this is perhaps one of the reasons that lies above the social drift that we are experiencing, we are seeing in these years. So I would like to ask you, which competence do you think that must be enhanced, that have been neglected in the past in our societies, and with particular reference to civil servants, what do they need to manage this complexity?
It's a great question. So governments often need to be much simpler insofar as they are dealing with ordinary citizens. So if you have a complicated form that's 18 pages, that is usually unhelpful, and it may be very harmful. If you're trying to help people to qualify for some benefit or to help them get educated, if it turns out that there's complexity in the system, the help you give might not be adequate. Now, civil servants are often dealing with very complicated problems. It might be road safety. Let's give that as an example, where in many nations, road safety isn't as good as it should be. And it's not easy to figure out how to make the roads safer. The best way to get an entry point into that complicated problem, I think, is to analyze the costs and the benefits. So if you're thinking, should we have bumper strips, as they're sometimes called, in a certain area where people are going to hear an unpleasant noise if they're going fast under their tires, it's a good question whether that's going to improve safety and by how much. It's not very costly to put bumper strips on a road. So the cost is going to be low. What are the benefits? If we're taking some steps, let's say, to move toward greener energy, maybe we're going to move toward electric cars, maybe we're going to use solar and wind rather than coal. What are the benefits exactly through one step rather than another? Now, often we won't know enough to know exactly what the benefits are or exactly what the costs are. But if civil servants ask that question, what are the costs and what are the benefits? Complicated problems will suddenly seem to be manageable. At least we will know what we don't know, and that's often a good incentive to try to find out.
Thank you. Let's move to the third and last questions. Other two books that are really relevant for us are Nudge and one of the recently published Sludge. Nudges are de facto public policies, and on the other hand, the sludges are the obstacles that are slowing down the processes outlined by nudges. So, with regard to the public sector, what is evident is the fact that public debate and media attention is more on sludges than on the attempts of civil institutions to improve citizens' lifetime. This is maybe due to the fact that the public sector is operating in a field which is very sensitive for people, because in some ways it determines their mood, it determines their attitude, and in general it affects their perception and trust in institutions. Do you think that we need to focus more on the sludge reduction to rebuild the trust on government, in government?
Absolutely. So I've worked in 4 administrations of the United States. I worked under President Carter, I worked under President Reagan, I've worked under President Obama, and I've worked under President Biden. And under all 4 of those, the problem of sludge has been a serious one. Now let's define the term. We're speaking of administrative burdens. They may be paperwork requirements that people face in order to get something from the government or to avoid some hardship. It might be some online site that is very hard to navigate. It might take an hour or 2 hours rather than 5 minutes. It might be waiting time. where you have to go somewhere and sit in an office for a couple of hours. It might be waiting time where you file your application and it'll take 3 weeks or a month or 6 weeks to get an answer. This sludge is a time tax, it's sometimes called. It's a tax on people's time, and it's an especially serious problem for people who are poor, people who are really busy, people who don't have a lot of education, people who are sick, and people who are elderly. Often sludge, the burden of sludge is borne disproportionately by women who manage the household disproportionately, more than men do, and who often have to navigate the sludge. Governments often have put a premium on imposing more sludge in order to ensure that, let's say, a program is working the way it's supposed to. But the serious harms of sludge have not been sufficiently attended to. This is a major imperative for governments in this year. After the pandemic, a lot of governments have started to focus on sludge audits, by which they do an audit of the volume of sludge imposed by civil servants on citizens, and sometimes the volume of sludge imposed on civil servants themselves, who have a harder time doing their job because they are spending so much time filling out forms and complying with reporting requirements. President Biden issued an executive order, as it's called, on customer service. And the basic idea, it's a very long executive order. They're usually short. It directs all parts of the government to reduce sludge. And one of the most important words in the executive order is the word you use, trust, where the basic idea is that administrative burdens often reduce and sometimes destroy trust in government because people think you promised me this or you committed to that, and that doesn't work because I can't navigate the system. Sludge is a curse. It's often a wall that separates human beings from something that can make their lives much better. The project of sludge reduction isn't typically associated with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it's not far off in its association with human rights.
Thank you so much, Professor Cass Sunstein, for your time, and see you next June at Forum PA 2022.
I'm greatly looking forward. I thank you.